It's the Santana Show. Interesting guests and insight in good conversation with Naomi Santana. Lock in, listen, engage.
Thanks for tuning in. Today, my very special guest is Evan Sanford. Evan is currently a producer at KESQ TV, an ABC-affiliated TV station in Palm Springs. Evan received his bachelor's degree in media studies from the University of Redlands. Before working with KESQ, Evan worked at ABC 7 LA and KPCC. He likes to innovate, educate, and collaborate with those around him, and he would like to make sure to pass it forward to help mentor the next generation when it comes to media and politics. Evan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. How have you been?
Good. It seems like we're getting through this pandemic. There's light at the end of the tunnel. It's feeling much better than we were a year ago. So we've come a long way, and it's really good to be here and see you. It's been a long time.
I know. It's so nice to see you too. Feels like it's been years.
For sure.
So how did the pandemic impact you?
Just like everybody, it impacted every aspect of my life, personally and professionally, and with my job. It was really interesting to see how we all came together to manage the impact of it and work from home, separate the newsroom into how we ended up making sure everyone was safe. Just the innovations that came with it, and how technology and things like what we're doing right now, Zoom coming into the forefront, and really impacting everything from the stories to the editorial meetings. I mean, everything was changed. So it was very interesting to be right in the middle of it and see how we adapted to it. And we weren't the only ones. Every station across the country and the world all had to deal with this. And it was interesting to see what worked and what didn't. And God forbid this ever happens again, but now we've learned how we can actually make TV or radio or any kind of media possible just with technology that didn't seem possible a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Well, it is possible. So that was interesting. And of course, family not being able to see certain relatives until the vaccination, all of that was very difficult. And I'm just glad we appear to be getting through it. And hopefully this summer is signaling the end of this.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I would definitely agree with you. So what was it like for you personally to work from home?
The way we did it was every other week. I'd be in 1 week, home from 1 week. And as you saw when you came and took a tour of the station, the equipment that I used was very specific, and the software, so it couldn't be installed on my personal devices. So I had to get a work from home setup. So that was interesting. And then it was just a matter of so many more phone calls and text messages, because I couldn't just stand up and say, what's the answer to this question? You know, I can't just ask
Exactly.
there.
Mhm.
And that's what a newsroom is. It's putting all these people together and giving them the ability to just work cohesively together. And that was just so hard. And I really never got over that, because one of the reasons I'm in this business is to work in an environment like that. So not having that was very hard. And I missed that. A lot of people liked working from home, and that's fine. But for me, it was kind of good to have 1 week on, 1 week off. It was just enough to wait for the week from home to see everybody, even with masks and all of that. It was still good to see everybody just for a few days and then back to home. Some of the actual job uh, responsibilities were changed because I just couldn't do some of the things from home. I can't cue the anchors during my show. I can't do certain things, so I can only write and do all of the prep work for the show as I do in the station. But when it came time to the show itself, someone else had to do that, take over that responsibility for those 35 minutes. So I couldn't do that. So I watched it on TV just like everybody else, which was interesting, because normally I'm in the booth and watching all these other things happening, but it's another thing to just watch it just like everyone else in their living room at 11 o'clock. It's very different.
That's what you did? Oh my goodness.
For
That's
the,
like a drastic change, though.
yes,
Like after I saw what you do in the booth and then just seeing it on TV, that's kind of strange.
it is. And I'd have my computer in front of me so I could adapt if there was breaking news and add those stories, but I couldn't actually be there to tell my anchors. I'd have to message them in our Slack that I'm
So it
at.
took more time. There was like more steps in the process, right?
Exactly. Everything took longer, which, you know, I just am very much a proponent of being back in person and seeing everybody, because it just makes everything so much easier. I know people liked and got used to the working from home. And if that works for you, that's great. For me personally,
So you mentioned breaking news earlier. How do you deal with breaking news? Like, what do you do?
depends on what it is. But normally what happens is, let's say there is a call on the police scanners for some kind of murder. Well, either I'm listening or someone else is listening to those scanners. So we hear that sheriff's deputies or some police presence is headed towards this. So I immediately start working on some kind of script. We don't have anything confirmed, but we know that there's something. Then it's a matter of reaching out and seeing if my reporter, depending on how close we are to the show, if my reporter's already working on something and we have to pull him to this, we have to have that kind of conversation. So if it is a major incident, some kind of investigation like that, then I have a conversation with the assignment desk editor, the anchors, reporter, photographer, all very quickly. And if it is before the show, we can make that decision and say, okay, we're going to do something different with the story you were working on. Let's say it's 8 o'clock at night. We have 2.5 hours. That's plenty of time to have him go across the Coachella Valley to this other city, wherever he is, and set up and then be ready at 11 o'clock for that story. And then maybe if he was doing a package or something, we could move that down and just have it self-contained. He doesn't have to front it. He can just have it edited whatever he has, or I can take what he has and break it down into a shorter story, so we still get it, because obviously whatever he was working on was important at the time. So that way we get 2 stories out of that. And of course I'm working on the script as much as I can from what we can confirm. If we have to page the sheriff's department or get some kind of statement or update from a PIO from a police department, all of that is what we use, not the scanner. We never use what the scanner says, because that can be wrong. And we don't want to be wrong when we're sharing that there's something happening somewhere. We have to get it confirmed. So I can work on as much of a script as I can, get prepared, tell the director I'm adding this story in the script. But it really comes down to what information is confirmed, and that is what Jake would say on TV, my reporter. That's what he would go with. He's not going to say, we heard reports of. What we will say sometimes, if neighbors come up to us and say, I saw a man do this, then we can say, neighbors tell News Channel 3 that this happened. That's different than just hearing something without seeing it for ourselves. If someone else said it, we can attribute it to them. And that's fine, because if they're wrong, they're wrong. But we at least told people, this person gave us that information.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
we didn't say it. It was them.
Right, and it's not to pass blame, but when we're talking about information that is critical to the community, we want to be as accurate as possible. We're not just going to go with, we heard something without seeing it or someone else confirming it. A scanner is just someone, some fire departments and police department saying that there might be this thing and that they're checking it out. That doesn't mean that there was a hit and run, or that there was a stabbing, or that there was some crime that was committed. We have to wait till they arrive, but that could be 20 minutes. That could be a while, and there's an investigation that takes place when they do arrive. All of that takes time. When we're in a breaking news situation, we want to be there and get information as quickly as possible. And if it's in some kind of residential neighborhood and we knock on doors and say, did you have any information on this? Did you see this? Did you hear this? What did this look like? We can say, neighbors saw a man run. You get it. You get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a long process, because it's like we don't know if what we're being told is accurate or not, and we have to like you said, we have to wait 20 minutes, or maybe it could be an hour, or who knows how many hours. So I definitely know what you're saying. What is a common misconception that people have about your job?
Well, there's a few, but one that was pretty prevalent during the last presidential administration was that somehow we were contributing to fake news. And there was nothing on this earth that upset me more than hearing that, because there's no difference between us and any other job. We don't wake up in the morning and say, how can I misinform people? How can I, do my job the worst way possible? And that's how I interpreted how people would use that. I work really hard to make sure that we're informing people. I mean, that's my whole job. That's what I'm dedicating my life to. And to have people even question that, let alone doubt it or not watch because of that, is really, I wouldn't go so far as to say infuriating, but it's pretty upsetting that can be such a widespread belief. But I think now some of that rhetoric is gone, and out here, people really trust us. So if you're out in the community and you have a News Channel 3 shirt on or a hat on, people do respect you. We've been in the community for decades, and people know us and they do trust us. But if you're just meeting somebody, my family is back in LA, and so I'm going back there all the time. And if I'm just introducing myself and then having a conversation about what I do, there was a good period where it was a joke to some people to say, oh, you're part of that. And I would never let it go. It was too difficult to just laugh it off. First of all, it wasn't funny. And second of all, it just was worth taking the time to question why they would even say that. Have you even watched our newscast? Do you follow us? Do you see what we're putting out? What is not correct? I'd be interested to know what you thought was incorrect. So I know it would have been a lot easier to just let it go, but I just can't do that.
No, there are just some things that are hard to let go. No matter how much you want to let it go, you just can't.
Yeah. The other misconception, very briefly, is that people confuse local news with cable news. We're not CNN. We're not Fox. We're not MSNBC. We're local news. We are what is happening in your community. I mean, it's really important to have that. And so if I just say I produce the news, they automatically, I'm talking about most younger people, they just assume that news is just all the same, and there's no difference. And there is. It's a huge difference. So I'm just continuing to dedicate my life to informing the public, however they end up seeing us. I know the environment is changing every year, but if you just look at our social media presence, it's really impressive in terms of the reach that we have in the community. People do trust us here. They know us. We've been in the community for so long, and the brand is so recognizable. And it's nice to work for a place that is just that, which is trusted and recognized.
And that was really good insight. So, what inspired you to pursue a career in journalism?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think it was always destined to happen. I think I've always been interested in this line of business. And since as far back as I can remember, I've always been fascinated with just the history of journalism, the people that have been there, that have become role models for me. I've always been surrounded and fascinated with the world itself of journalism. So whether it was radio at the beginning or TV as it is now, it was just always in my bones that I've just felt like it was calling me. And so I just kind of did what I had to do to get into it. I didn't really have a set path, but based on my life experiences, it just all kind of fell into place, and it's still happening. There's lots of different opportunities, and my interests align with that. There's different paths that anyone can take. So I don't really want to lock myself into one particular aspect, because there's so many things you can do when you're in the news business or entertainment or any kind of production environment. So I have a lot of interests, and it makes it fun for me because I enjoy doing all of these things, not just editing, not just writing, not just filming. It's everything, and it's a really good opportunity when you're a producer to be overseeing all of these things, and have a say in all of it, because it's your vision, it's your show. You get to write a story and then pick the video and tell the editor, I want to do this or this. And so it's, at least for right now, it seems to be just fine. But to answer your question, originally in high school, I was interested in radio, so I helped start a station in high school. And I did that for the last 2 years. And that really set the stage for how I would get into it and the people I would meet along the way. And then when I was looking at colleges, I was interested at the time, of course, in radio. And so I asked on different tours what was offered at those different campuses. And then I went to Redlands. It was the last tour of like 10 schools I had done over that week. And they said, well, we don't have a station, but you could start one, but that would be on you. It's not already there. And of course, to me, that's like challenge accepted. I'm ready to go. And so by the time I left the tour, I was totally ready to do that. And within just a few days of getting to campus that fall, I was already working on restarting that station and getting people involved and building it from the ground up. And it was truly the best time of my life. I mean, it was 4 years of just incredible opportunities, and working with other students and mentoring them and getting them the opportunity to get their hands on equipment that they hadn't had before. And because, of course, we were a new station, there was no program. So I had one of the first shows. So I started interviewing people. I did that for a year and a half. And then I was like, well, in the age we live in, everything has to have that visual medium component to it. And so I was saying to myself, why don't we start filming these radio interviews?
Oh, that's interesting. So it was just mainly radio, right?
Well, we were just a radio station at the time, but I was thinking about how other stations are dealing with getting as much content out there and what people are interested in. And something that I had heard about and seen in different conferences that I had been to is that even if it's a radio station, you can still have video. So even if it's just extra stuff that you can put out there, there's never enough content for people. So then I started thinking about how we can redo the studio to include cameras for a radio show. And then just because of the space that we were given, I was able to give up my office on one side of the hallway, which had been on the other side of it was another small room. We converted that into the radio station. And the other side of the hallway, which had been the radio booth, we made it a TV studio. So now we had radio and TV for the last 2 years. And so for those final 2 years of my college career, I started doing the same show, but a TV format. And I got a chance to interview so many people. It was just really an amazing opportunity. Life-changing for sure. And it really, once again, contributed to how I just kind of continued in that path, moving away from radio into TV news. And over the course of my college career, I started an internship at KPCC, as you mentioned, and that was great, and it helped me continue to build the radio station. That was in the summer after my sophomore year, and then going into junior year and senior year, then I started working at ABC7 and continued that after I graduated. And it reinforced the idea that TV news is where I'm supposed to be. So it was a pretty organic path, and I enjoyed every moment of it, and it taught me everything. I think there's so much to be said about getting out of the classroom and into that kind of production environment, because there's nothing that can prepare you for the opportunity to work in the real world like being in the real world, because every newsroom, every station, every organization is different, and you cannot learn that in a textbook. It is not possible. The only way to see how these places work is if you're there. And so
Absolutely.
if you're there for a few years, the next place you'll be at is completely different. But at least you'll have some kind of understanding about how these organizations can work, what does work, what doesn't work, and how you can be better moving on to your next job and what you can look forward to.
Absolutely. The show that you were doing with the radio station, it was called Inside the Studio with Evan Sanford, correct?
That's right.
I've seen some of your interviews and I was just amazed by it because like you did such a great job with that. And my question is though, how were you able to contact those people that you interviewed?
Well, I was very lucky. For starters, a lot of the people that came to campus in my time there were really important to me and fascinated me. But I also took the approach of really only having people that I thought mattered. I didn't want to just saturate the show with people that didn't matter. And not to be mean, and no offense to anybody. But
No, I know what you mean.
it
You
was
wanted something good and something valuable that was worth people's time.
right. I didn't want to waste anybody's time. I wanted to make sure that if they were tuning in, they were going to learn something. I know you picked up on something that I had embraced when I was in college, and I made it the motto of the station is educate, innovate, and collaborate. That's really important to me. It really was. And so all the people that came on the show, I am so proud that every one of those people came on the show. And I was lucky that a lot of them came to campus, and I would find a way to talk to them before they gave a speech to students or after a lecture. I worked with Student Life to get it eventually. This didn't start at the beginning, and it was very difficult because a lot of people came and I wasn't able to talk to them. And I was really, it was a bummer for sure, because I was really looking forward to talking to them. but there's campus politics, and you can only do so much. But at the end, it worked out really well, and I was really proud. But long story short is I was able to get my program in their contract so that when they would sign up to come to campus and give a lecture, it would be part of the contract that they would come and talk with me. So I
Oh,
learned a
that's
lot.
smart.
Well, really, it's very difficult to get those big names on a campus type show. Why would they give their time if,
Hmm.
if it's not a big deal? But I had to prove myself. It didn't happen overnight. I mean, it took years. So I had to just prove myself that I took everything very seriously. If anyone knows me, it's that I take pretty much everything very seriously. And I think they were impressed with that. And over time, they saw that the people that did come on the show not only had a good time, but they appreciated what I had brought to the table and given them an opportunity to talk about the issue of the day. So that's how some of those people were able to go on. And some of them were personal connections, so they would come out. Redlands, fortunately, isn't that far from Los Angeles. It's just an hour away. So it was convenient for some people. If it had been in the age of the pandemic, I would have been able to get more people because could have done things like this. But
Absolutely.
that was not even a remote possibility or thought in my mind. This really does have implications for talk shows or informational programs like that, for the future of those, because it really opens up the possibility of getting people not just in your city, but not in your state, but around the country, around the world. I think it's a good thing, but I also hope that there's still an appetite for in-person conversations.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you on that.
There's really no substitute. And I just don't know if
Yeah,
it's
no,
passion, but there's something if you're in the presence of somebody that you can go off of that energy, and I think it translates.
absolutely. So, can you tell me a little bit more about your experience with KPCC and with ABC 7LA? What were your roles in those organizations?
Sure. So I was an intern at KPCC, and that's the NPR station in Pasadena. And it was my first real opportunity to work in the business. And I absolutely loved it. It was a game changer for me. I'd never been in a newsroom before, or working in a newsroom before. So this was really new for me. And it's such a beautiful facility too. It's modern, and it's open, and it's bright, and it's totally not what people think of when they think of a newsroom, because they think of shows and movies where it's a small room with no windows and bad lighting, and that's pretty typical, actually. Well, that is very much the case, but this was totally different, and the studios were incredible, and it gave me so many ideas to bring back to my station, which is part of the reason I took it in the first place, because that's what I wanted to get out of it. And one of the first things that I remember as my internship started was something that was written on a whiteboard that was right in the middle where our editorial meetings would take place. And I have this written down on my desk, and I've had it since then. I wrote it on a Post-it that day, and I had it on my desk at KDOG, which is the radio station that I worked at Redlands. And then I brought it to this station and got it. It's a little Post-it note, so I got a little frame for it. And it's really important to me. And it was, what is the story you're trying to tell, and how are you going to tell it? And pretty much, if you answer that question, you're set. Every day the stories are different, but if you can remember what it is you're trying to focus on and bring to the table, and understand how you're going to relate that information to the audience, those two things are so important. And not just in this business, but in general, if you're storytelling, what is the story you're trying to tell? And how are you going to tell it? If you can focus on those two things, I think everything else is going to fall in place. So I got a chance to work on Take Two, which is one of their shows at KPCC, and I enjoyed that so much. I got to pitch stories, pre-interview guests, be in the control room for the shows themselves. I got to learn so much in the front row for that program. And then other icons from that program I'd see every day because we're all in the same room. And then fortunately for me, I got a chance to interview one of the hosts on KPCC when he came to Redlands a year or so later. It was just surreal to be interviewing a host that I had been working 50 feet across the room from, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So Larry Mantle, who hosts Air Talk, came on my program. And there is no one on this earth that can be as comfortable talking about anything as him. He's done it for 25 years, talked to something like, 30,000 guests, because his program is like a round table. So it's multiple guests a day for a couple hours. So you do that over decades. And it adds up. So he's talked to everybody. He has a story about everything. And that's why I love people like that, because you can just listen to them talk for hours. And it's all fascinating stuff. I just love when historians or people that have this inside knowledge about a certain topic, you can't find that anywhere else. But he's got these secondhand stories, which are just fascinating. So I enjoyed that immensely. And then eventually the next summer I started at ABC7, and I was a news assistant there. And I got to do everything. It wasn't an internship because that was a separate job, but it was a lot of everything. So I got a chance to work on things that producers needed, the executive producers needed, the assignment desk. Pretty much everyone in the newsroom interacts with news assistants because they're there to help. One of the jobs would be to roll the prompter, and that's it. Because there's so many shows and they're back to back, one of the shifts would just be prompt the 3 o'clock, the 4 o'clock, the 5 o'clock, the 6 o'clock, the 7 o'clock, and the 11 o'clock. And in the middle, answer the phones at the assignment desk. That was one whole shift, and I did that for months. So it was 3 to midnight, came in, or 2:30, just before the 3. And
so like the schedule that you have now?
Exactly. Not a lot's changed in that department. But I was on multiple different shifts on that job, and you just got to start somewhere. So there were overnight shifts and morning shifts and dayside shifts and night shifts, and all in the same week. So you wouldn't even have a normal 5-day in a row type deal. So when that happens, embrace it and enjoy it, because some people never get that, or it takes a long time to get there. So I'm very lucky in that respect. But going back to some of the responsibilities I had in that job, it was finding file video for producers. They would need some shot of, kids from this school, but no faces because we can't show faces from this year because of this incident. So then I would have to find all of these, things for them for their stories, and that was just part of the job. And now I'm doing similar things, but I don't have anybody to do that for me. I do it myself. It's a small market deal. So when I get back to LA or some bigger market, there'll be news assistants ready, willing, and able to help with producers. So that's something to look forward to. And then I was there for so long that I became a senior news assistant pretty quickly, because most of those people.
Really? How long were you there?
About 3 years. So most of the people that are in that job, they are there and gone in 6 months, a year.
Yeah.
because they want to be a reporter or they want to do something, and this is just a way to get some experience and some knowledge and then be out the door. But I never wanted to be a reporter. That wasn't something that was appealing to me. So I was just content in continuing to learn and again, start to teach and mentor other newer news assistants. And I enjoyed that a lot. And I've always enjoyed doing that, as you can see. So because I was a senior news assistant, they gave me specifically other opportunities that didn't often come to news assistants. For instance, with the toy drive that happens every year, the Spark of Love toy drive that ABC7 puts on, they had me work in the community relations department to shoot a video to explain, because they never really did that. It's so well known amongst most of the community what it is, but they never had a video that said when it started and how it started and show the process of how, when the toys are donated at those collection days that they promote and hold every year across the Los Angeles and other county areas.
That's right.
They never really explained the process of how it goes back to the fire departments, then they organize it, and then they distribute it to local organizations in need. I got a chance to ride along with the fire departments and see how they organized it, and making a video that showed the children getting the gifts as well. You don't always see that. And so I was really excited and grateful for the opportunity to do that and show what kind of extraordinary gift it is to have a drive that benefits for so many years. So I was really that was really fun to have that. But not everyone gets that opportunity. But they knew me, they trusted me, and they gave me the equipment to do it and the time to do it. So that was a couple months from like October to December. That was a really nice big project that I enjoyed very much.
That sounds really nice. What advice or tips would you give to someone trying to get into the journalism industry?
Don't be afraid to try something new. You may be comfortable in front of or behind the camera, but try doing something that you're not comfortable with, because you'll never know unless you do try. And there were times where I was really not sure about going in a certain direction, but you really won't know until the opportunity presents itself, and it might be years in between those opportunities. So take advantage of everything that comes your way. I think that's the second piece of advice is, if there is anything that you can do, always do it. Don't second guess yourself. Ask, why did I do this? Why did I spend that time? Why did I do that job? All of it is a learning experience. It all impacts you and makes a difference in the end. So it's all worth it. Embrace it. Take the bull by the horns. Go for it. There's people that support you and want to see you succeed. So never be afraid to reach out for help and ask, what do you think of this? What are your thoughts on this idea that I have? It's all a collaborative learning environment. So you'll never know unless you try. I think that's the bottom line.
Yes, that is absolutely true. Those are beautiful words, beautiful advice. In regards to like the job search, what would you tell someone who is like currently looking for a job? What would you tell them based on experiences you've had?
Well, I guess it depends on what job they're looking for, because I've got experience in what I've been working in, but I assume that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I would say reach out to people who might have worked there before. LinkedIn is a great resource to see if there are people that went to your school that work at the place of business you're trying to get into. That is something that's worked out for me. But really, it's a cliche, but really, people know people. And if you ask, have you heard about this station, or what do you know about this place? They may not have worked there, but they may know somebody who worked there. When I started, it was so fascinating to me to ask somebody about something, and they'll say, "Oh, I had a friend who she used to work here, and now she's in Colorado. Actually, she was in Colorado. Now she's in Massachusetts." Like, how do people not remember what stations they've gone on to and stayed in touch? But it's just the case. It is, you become so close with people when you start out that you will follow them in their careers and you see where they progress. And so utilize these people as a resource because they may know somebody who has that connection that you need. It really is so hard to get your foot in the door if it's your first attempt and you're going in cold. But if you have someone to make an introduction, just based on my experience, we get thousands of emails a day. So it's not that we're missing your email, but it's just, it gets buried, it gets lost. So if you email someone and you don't hear back, it's not that they're ignoring you. They just probably didn't see it. So don't give up, and just keep reaching out to people who might be able to get you in another way. Because let's say you're emailing me and I don't respond. If someone knows me and they work with me, they can walk up to me and say, there's someone that needs to call you, or you need to get back to them. That's a whole different situation. Because if you've got an inbox of 3,000 unread emails a day, one email when you're scrolling through to see if there's anything important, because we're getting all these press releases and, Nixle updates, and with the pandemic, all of the numbers from the different counties, there's so much that you're looking for in one email. It's unfortunate, but just one email out of so many gets lost. But if someone texts me, or I can text the assistant or news director saying there's somebody that wants to come in for an interview or something like that, that's a whole different situation. So I think that's part of my advice.
That's great. That's fascinating. And yeah, I know that you guys get a lot of emails. That's something that I've learned. Would you like to share your social media handles, Evan?
Sure. Just Evan Sanford on anything. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's Twitter. All the same.
All right. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah, sure. Anytime.
You've been listening to The Santana Show with Naomi Santana. Interesting guests and insight with good conversation. You can follow Naomi on Twitter at Naomi Santana 45 and The Santana Show at The Santana Show _. Please subscribe to The Santana Show on YouTube. Thank you for listening. Join Naomi again next time on The Santana Show.